When it comes to Donald Trump's cabinet picks, it is really hard to decide who is going to be most dangerous to more Americans. Because Donald Trump is nominating a whole bunch of people that just aren't qualified to do the jobs that he has selected them to do. But if I were to have to choose one name that I would put near the top of that list, it would definitely have to be Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Because the Health and Human Services Department, I think, is one of those agencies that interacts with many Americans on a daily basis. So it is very plausible that with poor leadership coming from RFK, that many Americans' lives are going to be negatively impacted. And now, I've already done one video about his confirmation hearing, where we kind of focused on the anti-vax views that he holds. But I do think it's important to call out a few other things from that hearing, because the Health and Human Services Department does so much more than just regulate vaccines. So let's go ahead and kick things off by looking at Senator Michael Bennet, and he's just calling RFK out for being unqualified. Just hands down, unqualified.
What is so disturbing to me is that out of 330 million Americans, we're being asked to put somebody in this job who has spent 50 years of his life not honoring the tradition that he talked about at the beginning of this conversation, but peddling in half-truths, peddling in false statements, peddling in theories that, create doubt about whether or not things that we know are safe are unsafe. Not that every vaccine in America is unsafe, not that you can't possibly have an adverse reaction, but that parents and children in my old school district and school districts all over this country would be better off not getting vaccinated than getting vaccinated. Unlike his own children who were vaccinated, unlike the people he invited to his house in Los Angeles for their party who were vaccinated.
And this is an absolutely reasonable thing to say. Of all of the 350 million people in our country, why RFK? It just goes to show that the Trump administration is not interested in putting competent people into these positions of power. And it is crazy that somebody like RFK is even up for the job, because aside from all of his anti-vax conspiracies, he just seems to be very anti-science in many different ways. And Senator Bennet calls out many of those things we'll get to in a moment, but just think about the different things that HHS does. They look over the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, they do the FDA, they do all of these things that are very closely related with science. So why would we put somebody that seems to be so anti-science into that position? So I think it is beyond reasonable for Senator Bennet to be calling this stuff out. And here he lists, like I said, many of the crazy things that RFK believes. And some of these things are pretty wild. It's a little bit of a longer video. Let's go ahead and make it through this, and then we will discuss.
Did you say that COVID-19 was a genetically engineered bioweapon that targets black and white people but spared Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people?
I didn't say it was deliberately targeted. I just quoted an NIH-funded and NIH published study.
Did you say that it targets black and white people but spared Ashkenazi Jews?
I quoted a study, Your Honor. I quoted an NIH study that showed that
I'll take that as a yes.
races
I have to move on, I have to move on. Did you say that Lyme disease is highly likely a materially engineered bioweapon? I made sure I put in the highly likely. Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon?
I probably did say that.
Did you say that?
And that's what the developer of Lyme
I want all of
disease
our
said.
colleagues to hear it, Mr. Kennedy. I want them to hear it. You said yes. Did you say that exposure to pesticides causes children to become transgender?
No, I never said that.
Okay, I have the record that I'll give to the chairman, and he can make his judgment about what you said. Did you write in your book, and it's undeniable, that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS? Yes or no, Mr. Kennedy?
I'm not sure if I made that.
Okay, I'll give it to the chairman, Mr. Kennedy. And my final question, did you say on a podcast, and I quote, I wouldn't leave abortion, to the states. My belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have the government involved, even if it's full term. Did you say that, Mr. Kennedy?
Senator, I believe that every abortion is a tragedy.
Did you say it, Mr. Kennedy? This
believe
matters. It doesn't matter what you come here and say that isn't true, that's not reflective of what you really believe, that you haven't said over decade after decade after decade, because unlike other jobs we're confirming around this place, this is a job where it is life and death.
I am so glad that at least somebody understands the gravity of a decision like this. And I'm so glad that he is calling him out on all of these different crazy things that he believes. And the crazy thing about all of this is that RFK is sitting here in front of Congress saying, oh, I'm not sure if I said it. Oh, maybe I said that one. No, I didn't say that. But all of these things that he was just asked about, they were recorded. They're on video. They're on different podcasts. So it is wild to me that RFK is even trying to weasel away from all of these different statements that he undoubtedly made. We've covered him in other videos in the past, and we've gone over many of the things that Senator Bennett has just mentioned. And he did say all of these different crazy things. And how are we supposed to trust that if we have another pandemic like COVID-19, that RFK Jr. is going to direct policy in a way that is going to protect Americans if he believes all this crazy shit? It just makes absolutely no sense. And somebody, at least, needs to be calling him out on this stuff. And I wish the Republicans in the Senate would do their job and not allow these unqualified individuals to step near these important offices. It could have such negative impacts on the American people, but our Republican senators just don't seem to care. They just want to bend the knee to Trump and force everybody through because they have the votes, and it just doesn't matter. And I think they are doing a disservice to the American people. Let's go ahead and move on to RFK talking about how we just need to reevaluate Mifepristone, which is one of the drugs that is involved with chemical abortion.
We need to understand the safety of every drug, Mifepristone and every other drug. And President Trump has made it clear to me that one of the things he is not taking a position yet on Mifepristone, a detailed position, but he's made it clear to me that he wants me to look at safety issues, and I'll ask NIH and FDA to do that.
The problem with this is that Mifepristone has been on the market for decades, and there have been an abundance of safety and efficacy studies that prove, without a doubt, that Mifepristone is safe. How does it make any sense? If you want an efficient government, why would you spend resources on studying a drug that we already have a safety profile for, that we already know the efficacy of? It makes absolutely no sense. But because he has to go along with Donald Trump's anti-abortion stances, this is the type of answer we get in a confirmation hearing. Mifepristone is more safe than Tylenol. So it doesn't make any sense in the world that we would want to go reevaluate that just because Donald Trump said something. Let's move on to him being questioned about how he just sold out his bodily autonomy stances just to be close to Trump.
Asked that bodily autonomy is one of your core values. The question is, do you stand for that value or not? When was it that you decided to sell out the values you've had your whole life in order to be given power by President Trump?
Senator, I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy, that we can't be a moral authority in this country.
Right, but that isn't what you said back in New Hampshire in 2023. My question is exactly when did you decide to sell out your life's work and values to get this position?
Senator, I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy.
So what you're telling us, just to be clear, because my time is limited, is that regardless of what you believe, regardless of what values you have, if President Trump tells you to do something, you're going to do it.
I think that's exactly what he is saying. And it is absolutely despicable that RFK has been an advocate for pro-choice policy and bodily autonomy. And because Donald Trump wanted to consider him for a cabinet position, he just 180'd on the spot, just so he could get a little bit closer to the wealth and to the power. This should be a disqualifying thing. Why not stand up for your principles? Oh, it's because Donald Trump would have none of it. And so he would rather put on this performance for Donald Trump so he could get this position at HHS rather than stand up for what he believes. These people are morally bankrupt. And it is just wild to me how many in the new Trump administration are so morally bankrupt and so corrupt. And I think that is why I'm happy that Elizabeth Warren asked about not profiting from the role at HHS, but also, even when you are done there, can you commit to not profiting?
Any compensation from any lawsuits against drug companies while you are secretary and for 4 years afterwards?
Well, I'll certainly commit to that while I'm secretary. But I do want to clarify something because you're making me sound like a shill. I put together that case. I did the Science Day presentation to the judge on that case to get it into court.
Mr. Kennedy,
hearing.
Mr. Kennedy, it's just a really simple question.
Yeah,
You've taken in $2.5 million. I want to know if you will commit right now that not only will you not go to work for drug companies, you won't go to work suing the drug companies and taking your rake out of that while you're a secretary and for 4 years after.
I think he is the only person that is making himself out to be some sort of shill. As he mumbles his way through these answers, doesn't give a direct answer. This should be a relatively simple question to answer. Do you commit to not profiting off of your role in government, not only while you are serving in government, but for 4 years after? I mean, this is something that the MAGA base has been screaming about for years now. This revolving door of government officials and private businesses. So why is it that RFK cannot answer this question? And then Elizabeth Warren throws out an example of how he could abuse his position for more profit.
You could change which claims are compensated in the vaccine injury compensation program. There's a lot of ways that you can influence those future lawsuits and pending lawsuits while you are Secretary of HHS. And I'm asking you to commit right now that you...
So this isn't even something that I had necessarily considered before, how the director of the Health and Human Services Department could shape policy that then he could go use later to enrich himself. Things like deciding how vaccine injury claims might be handled or any other array of things I just didn't even consider. So I'm really glad that Elizabeth Warren at least put an example out there of how he could abuse his power in this role. Because if the Trump administration has shown us anything, is that the corruption is out in the open. They do not even care anymore. They are lining their own pockets. We've got the Trump and Melania meme coins that is a complete abuse of their role, and all the corruption is just out in the open. So at least we are getting this type of stuff on the record, because when history looks back at this time and these people in the second Trump administration, it is not going to look kindly on these folks. They are morally bankrupt. They are corrupt. They have sold out all of their principles to fall behind and bend the knee to a wannabe strongman, and it is absolutely disgusting. We should want better for our government officials. And even if you are a Republican that supports Donald Trump, even you should want better for our government officials. We should be hiring competent people that can do the role. But Donald Trump has proven time and time again that he is not interested in competence, he is interested in loyalty. So that is why we are seeing this DEI program for people that are loyal to Donald Trump. I will leave it there for now. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe, maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We have to build something here on the left that can adequately push back against the right-wing media ecosystem, because the right-wing media ecosystem just lets people like RFK float on through without a critical thought at all. So if you do appreciate the work I do, please do remember to subscribe. If you want to see some of the other crazy theories that RFK believes in and how he was involved in the measles outbreak in Samoa, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.